In 2017, I taught media literacy to the general public. I was in 8 different states, 10 different cities over a course of a month, and I had a curriculum that was fun and engaging, and it hopefully lit up some of the minds of people who didn't understand what it really meant to use critical thinking to assess the information you're getting from all the different streaming services out there that are coming at you fast with lots of pictures and stats and sounds, and you don't know what to believe anymore. And it was a really incredible honor to be in community talking about the challenges of what we're faced with these days in terms of how much information is coming at us, and a lot of it isn't true. So this is a very specific focus of mine and a passion of mine, and I'm really happy we can talk about it here on Swell and really learn what's going on and how different agencies are trying to tackle the problem of misinformation. Calvin Johnson's going to help us in this conversation. He recently obtained a master's degree in global policy from the University of Maine's School of Policy and International Affairs, and he focused on U.S. policy and national security. His research was really looking at the intersection of U.S. foreign policy and national security, and also examined sort of the scourge of misinformation. And he really is committed to discussing what this requires of all the agencies. What does it look like to have policy so that we can really combat the misinformation and disinformation coming at us? He believes that we have to take responsibility for technology, social media, and all the tools, and then look at ethics to help guide us in the process of kind of putting energy, money, time, resources, regulation around certain things that can lead us down a really, really dark road. And I would posit that we're already there. So I want to get right into this. I think we know that technology is the lead spreader of MDM, which stands for misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation, any way you want to frame it. And the federal government has to play a role, but the biggest question is, what is the agenda of the federal government, and does that change every 4 years? Or is there one perception that everyone holds true to? Like, is there one concept of what's misinformation? So I guess I want to start with that big question, Calvin. Welcome to Swell, by the way. What's the difference between propaganda and misinformation when it comes to the government's relationship to it?
Hi, thanks for having me on the platform. It's wonderful to be able to talk on this topic. As a fresh graduate, I'm hoping to bring new ideas to the table and hopefully increase more eyes on this particular topic in order to help promote media literacy, which I think is a key tool to help combat disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation. But to answer the question, propaganda, I want to give the definition of both propaganda and misinformation. Propaganda publicizes, or it showcases a political cause or a point of view, whereas misinformation seeks to put out incorrect or misleading information. Both are very crucial topics, or very crucial terms to the U.S. government. Propaganda can be either negative and positive. It's a double-edged sword. It just depends on the motivation of the institution or government that's releasing the particular message. If you think back in time, let's think back to the World War I. There were several different messages that came out from the U.S. federal government about the World War. So, and if we think into recent times, whereas the COVID pandemic happened, or COVID-19 pandemic was in play, the U.S. government and various governments around the world, you may have saw messages from your government saying, hey, take this particular medical vaccine in order to help alleviate the stress on our hospitals or the medical facilities around the world or whatnot. And so that is a form of propaganda in a sense. It's a form of good propaganda. But then I think the government in itself, or the federal government in itself, acts as a referee in between misinformation and then disinformation as well. For example, you have the CISA, it stands for the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency. It helps expose the American public to risks from foreign influence and influence operations and disinformation. And so that's a key agency that helps expose those potential risks to the American public. And then additionally, you have the Global Engagement Center, which is a part of the State Department. It helps coordinate the U.S. federal government in order to help expose and counter foreign state and non-state propaganda and disinformation. There are several government agencies that work to combat misinformation or disinformation, unique to their own identified mission. And so I think the federal government plays a big role in this particular field, and I think it's only going to evolve more as we see increased technology come out, as we see different technologies such as like AI, things of that nature that would happen to increase the ability of individual to see disinformation, misinformation, or even malinformation in this case. So there's a lot that federal government play a big stake in this particular topic, and so it's kind of wonderful to see how the government is going to continue to progress and move forward, even with the change of Congress, and then could be the change of a new president.
Hey, it's Theo. Thank you so much for posting this. And to Kelvin, welcome to Swell. Wonderful platform. So much great support and voices here. And I really enjoy being a part of this and being very welcome by the Swell community. So welcome as well. And in the case of, misinformation or how it's combated, and this is kind of a side note, but I was in Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts. So I have obviously my particular take on what may be seen as propaganda or misinformation. But now in an age where we can take information, correct or not, and we can literally distribute it and, have a delivery system such as social media to where the truth is secondary, like the actual truth of something is secondary. And we all know that anyone from politicians to, just about anybody has the capacity or can take a story and put a different angle to it in such a way to where it benefits their cause, or it's written or said or transcribed in a certain way to where it lacks certain information, especially in the media, and I should say newspapers, because this is an old type of saying, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And we have many people now who will take the story over the truth. And I think that's a big concern for me, and a question that I have, and I put to anyone and everyone, is how do you combat it when it's what these people want to hear? And I think that's very tricky, because you can let them know, you can provide evidence, like actual hard facts, evidence, to, hey, this is where the evidence takes us, as opposed to, well, here's a video you saw on YouTube that looks legit, production value, looks like something that may have been done on the up and up. So it's very unique to me to see how people react. Obviously it doesn't go well. We've seen that in practice, but I that is one question that really rattles around in my head is, the best way obviously to combat it is with the truth, but even when people don't want to admit it, like what's the best way to let people know? Because you don't want to talk down to them. That's not the right way to go about it. You want to educate them. So how do you do that in such a way to where you kind of present to them the truth and ultimately accept that? And I think another concern for me, and I'm glad that there's so many agencies out there that are, monitoring what's being put out there. But a concern also that kind of goes hand in hand with not being able to accept the truth or not wanting to is not knowing how these platforms distribute misinformation. And, we've seen much footage of Congress, senators, people speaking on the House floor, at the Capitol, And we have so many of our politicians not versed in how these devices work, or at least apparently, because a lot of these people have Twitter pages, Facebook pages, but obviously they don't run them. They have staffers for that. But having said that, it's little concerning for them to be kind of at the forefront, at least at that level, to ask questions about these people who, are tech billionaires within social media. And they ask them questions like how Facebook makes money and stuff like that. So for them to really have a hand in this, they have to understand what's going on. And if they don't get a handle on what's out there, I don't know how that's going to work, especially now that we live in this odd type of revisionist history to where, current world that will one day be history, I guess you could say, to where we can't necessarily agree on a fact. Misinformation aside, there's so many things at play, people's emotions, obviously, to where we can't even agree on a fact. And I think that is the key to combating misinformation. Even if it's news we don't want to hear, we should be able to hear it. But we got to at least be able to agree on what that news is.
Hi, thanks for your question. One of the things that I think that is important for this particular question, or at least an answer, and also thank you for your support, is that in order to, it's very hard actually to answer this question. I actually encountered the same question during my research, and it's kind of what sparked my first interest in this particular topic itself. I wrote a paper called Understanding Trust and Disinformation, and I wanted to try to find out why people trust disinformation. And I eventually I figured out, or at least I attached the social exchange theory to my research, and that's how I conducted my entire paper. I developed these 3 phases or whatnot that went through all the different levels of trust. But ideally, I think the summary, in summary of this particular paper, is that I figured out that most people trust false information is because they believe that there's a particular reward coming from them trusting it. And so I think if we go back to the community-based approach on this particular level, which a lot of organizations are doing this right now, is they're working through communities to improve how people respond to false information. And I think ideally, we know that sometimes it's hard to view reports and whatnot. It's hard to understand reports, and we can see that throughout various social media apps, where a lot of times you can present truth information from a source, and a lot of people say, "Hey, you know what? It's too much to go through this, or it's too much to read this." So what I think we have to do now is try to produce concise or precise information that is more concise, is more tuned down, and it's more friendlier, and it's also removing the technical jargon that a lot of people don't understand. Additionally, you also have to remove research that is too vivid or it's too much for a individual to consume. One, every human nowadays, we're involved in society a lot more. Things are more innovative, so we don't have a lot of time to commit to reading 50-page reports or 20-page reports. If you consolidate the information into a compact page or a compact, maybe 5 pages, maybe an individual will be more likely to read that report or read the truth information or understand something that's more truthful, because it's more consolidated. You don't have to go out of your way to do this, but I think it's an important approach. It's an important approach that you should take. Additionally, taking the community-oriented approach is making sure that an individual understands truthful information before, so when they encounter false information, they know how to respond to it. And you can do that simply by teaching an individual. You can start as early as an individual in pre-K about their government, about how the FEC work, or how the Federal Trade Commission works, or what is the FBI or the CIA, or what does the State Department do? How does a bill become a bill in Congress? I mean, there was an old video when I was back in, I think, middle school or whatnot, and we saw that video, and that taught me so much about Congress that I didn't know before. So if we go back to that stage where it used to be fun to learn about about things that are very important to society, and it used to be fun to learn about those things. So we go back in time and we use that same strategy, and we develop how people understand information or how they understand history. We develop a process or foundation where people become the first line of defense into countering false information. Additionally, if you go inside of a person's own community and if that person is associated to, let's say, a neighborhood or whatnot, if someone from that neighborhood says, hey, what you shared was false information, I believe they're more likely to change what they posted or what they said online that was false, because someone who is very close to them is now saying that, hey, this is false information. Whereas someone who's outside of their circle will totally, sometimes we like to be a little bit, we like to scold people, which it's a part of nature. It's human. It's a human way of nature, I think, or human way of acting. But from someone from within, they're more nice and more friendlier. So having that community-oriented approach is actually key to this particular question. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate your question. It was very interesting, and I wish you the best of luck moving forward.
Hey, Theo and Calvin, I love this back and forth, and I wanted to thank both of you. It really seems like there's a theme here of, empowering people with knowledge. That's like the first obvious line of offense and defense is education, and going into communities and using that baseline of influencers in the local communities. So getting local school boards involved with adult education, which I think is really sorely missing, so that the kitchen table is more vibrant with exchanges, because a lot of times kids learn stuff in schools, they come home and their parents might not be interested, or might be in their own world, or might be resentful even of their child having an attitude about, no, that's actually not true. I know that, Uncle Bob is in the basement on the internet, but what he's saying is actually not true. But what I really love is that we're looking at the highest levels in this conversation. We're not looking at the, critical thinking of just general people, around the country. We're looking at the trickle down effect of having leadership that really has tactical approaches, and I think that's what Calvin is studying and executing upon. And I'm wondering, Calvin, can you speak to us a little bit in this conversation about your professional trajectory? Where do you see yourself in the next, few years working from? Do you want to work inside the government? Do you want to work in technical organizations? Do you want to be an advocate? Do you want to do all three? I know you want to do service, so I want to just understand from what perch do you think you should sit to truly have the most impact?
This is a good question. Overall, I think with me as an individual who believe in integrating into the workspace on all different levels, I potentially see myself working in all three, actually. Because even as I'm progressing into a new particular position currently, I still want to advocate for different ideas and different particular toolkits that are different from a different lens or a different perspective. For me, I think that is key to combating disinformation, misinformation. The federal government, I think itself, has a role that it plays, and I believe it can combat disinformation. It just has to choose it strategically. And I think going through the State Department at a particular level is kind of a key way of doing so. For me, I think that is something that I want to definitely do, is work for the global, or work with, either for or with the Global Engagement Center, perhaps in the future, rather sooner than later. But that is something that I think is kind of key to that is my mission, is to pursue that particular career path. I either want to help develop tools or promote or advance tools in a sense to help combat MDM. So overall, I've had the experience of interning with CNAS, Center for Network Security, and then as well as ARC initiatives. Both exposed me to new particular communities in terms of the Washington, D.C. environment, and then as well as getting exposed to a multi-level approach of bipartisanship in terms of different objectives or different initiatives. So for me, I like to think that I work in all three. I believe advocacy is a strong part of countering disinformation. Additionally, promoting media literacy to kids, and just to kids overall, or dashboards is a unique process or a unique way to counter how we tackle disinformation or misinformation and malinformation. It's easy for us to say these things and not put it to actually action, which a new paper I just wrote kind of looks at that and kind of details it. But overall, I think the way that I see myself moving forward is through either the federal government or even on a state level, but also encouraging different programs on a local or community level as well, working with different groups such as and getting involved in the All Tech is Human space, which is where I recently joined, and it's been amazing to see the different people who are collaborating with each other in different places throughout the U.S. and around the world or whatnot. So that makes a big difference in my particular book. It makes a drop in the penny jar, I guess you could say. But I think having a community-based oriented approach is key, but then as well as working with the federal government as well is something that's key to myself, to me, is my goal, which is why I came to Washington, D.C. in the first place. I mean, I first started out in computer science, and I knew that I wanted to understand a little bit more of ethics and things of that nature. And so I dabbled into the policy space, thankfully, at the University of Maine. And it was amazing to see that how there was so much interesting things to learn about through taking that particular degree program. And so I proceeded to come to DC, and I wanted to make a different stance and a different approach, bring a fresh approach from someone who recently graduated from college and then recently experienced, all types of false information. And so that kind of sparked my positive initiative. So I guess in the end, I see myself doing all three. It's never too late, I think, for anyone to go back and consider advocating or consider working in this space. It's very easy to step into the space if you're from the marketing background, or if you're from the school or schooling or teaching background, or if you're from the technical background. I mean, there's a space for everyone in the fight for countering disinformation. And like I say, and one of the previous comments is that it starts with the people first. We are the first line of defense. We are the first line of defense of especially when we build our knowledge surrounding truthful information and spreading truthful and combating false information. So I guess that's the answer for this particular question. It's been an amazing conversation overall, and I hope to continue to spark up this particular topic throughout both this particular platform and then as well as any other platform.
Hey, Calvin, it's just so great to hear you talk about your future and the collaborations you're going to have, and the sort of your connection to local and federal opportunities, keeping your eye out for where you can help both places and be just a leader in this space. I also feel, voice is a really powerful medium, so I'm really happy to hear your authentic voice and hope to hear it more here. And I hope that everyone looks at misinformation as a problem, because I think sometimes we think it's a partisan issue, right? Like some people bend towards louder voices than smarter voices, and that's a big issue. And I hope we can find some unity around this challenge, and everyone take it as seriously as you are with your studies and with your eventual work. So I just want to be really clear that your leadership is important, and even in a space of swell, it would be great to continue learning from you and understanding what our opportunities are to just get better at thinking through information and how to disseminate it and how to use it and how to make a better world by knowing how to leverage knowledge and making sure the knowledge we are assimilating into our lives is credible. So thank you so much, and I look forward to more conversations with you.
Hey, it's Theo again. Thank you so much for chiming in and answering my questions. And, this is what I love about this platform. And I'm sure I've said before, this kind of engagement and having these great discussions and being able to not just kind of find root cause, but to kind of see and kind of discuss, in the best way possible. And I actually have like a discussion on it, how we go forward with some of these things. And I think one of the best things that you said that really hit the point home was that level of engagement, be it with your community or people close to you. And I kind of probably mentioned earlier on this one, when I asked my first questions, that can be so tricky as far as engagement, because, when, especially these days, social media obviously has a hand in it, but I think a lot of people have that line in the sand. Like, if they're right, they're right, they're wrong, they're wrong. There's no middle ground. There's no in between. And that can get very tricky because, and I don't mind admitting it, I've been there, where I've had kind of that attitude where it's like, well, you're just wrong. And then it's like, well, one, it can be very repellent. And two, just because they don't agree with you, depending on what you're discussing or how you're discussing it, doesn't make them bad in any way. There seems to be this weird kind of good versus bad side, or vibe, I guess you could say, I get from some of this, is that the other side of the argument that someone else may side with, where two parties may not agree, it turns into this right or wrong, and I think that's something we're sorely missing these days, is just the ability to discuss things. And we're not all going to agree. But I think just, kind of verbally in some ways going for the jugular and just all this vitriol does nothing. And even when, people get kind of sucked into misinformation and you want to help them, they can be really resilient. But having an adverse kind of reaction can also be repellent. And I've learned to not just engage, but it's a matter of how you engage. Because it's one of those that's, where does this come from? And it's not just a matter of, well, here's what's the information out there or what's the numbers say. It's a matter of, trying to separate the facts from the feelings. Because obviously many of us, we become very opinionated on things we're very strong about. So when we have a side, we tend to be very, very rooted to it, regardless of what may be, there or not there. But I also know that just because there's, that level of disagreement doesn't mean that the conversation should be going out the window. And I think it can be very tricky, but I also like to sit down with people. And I think part of it for me also comes back to so many things in this country, we get very separated on. But I think it affects us all. And, sooner or later, I think we need to find that common ground and kind of discussing an engagement, even and you said it perfectly, like a community level, like people in your family, people in your household, people you look to, people that, may be, a mentor, an educator of some kind. I think really helps kind of ground people. Because I think that with a lot of these things, especially with misinformation, we kind of lose our grounding. I think, there's always that, people talk about that separation between reality and truth. And that can get murky really quickly because, once again, it's like, okay, the reality you may experience may be different from the truth. But that can go for anybody. We all have those kind of separate points that can happen. And I think, first and foremost, it's just finding a common way to kind of discuss these things and bring them in. Being repellent to them doesn't help them, doesn't help you. But it's also a matter of sitting down and getting, that interpersonal engagement if possible. But thank you so much again. This is so great. I'm really enjoying this, and I hope to talk to you real soon.